Just imagine a man has fallen into a very deep pit. Somebody comes to him with a rope made of sheets tied together. And he says to the person, when you get a decent rope, you can pull me out. You would say that man is weird. But it doesn't seem so weird when you look at the story of Naaman, how he got healed. And today we want to examine the story and draw from it three basic lessons. First of all, grace is fundamental. It underlies God's dealings with man. Now, we live in what is called the age of grace. So we can miss the point that God has always dealt with man on the principle of grace. Go back to Eden, where God made for Adam and Eve coats of skins. That was an act of grace. And right down God's grace. And in the cup before us, God's grace shines out in at least two ways. First of all, the maid cared about the enemy. Here's a girl taken captive, wrenched from her home and family, and now a slave in a foreign country. And as a person descended from enslaved people, I struggle with slavery. I recall my first trip to England, and I saw all these castles, palaces. Thought to myself, they were built on the blood and sweat of my ancestors. That's stuff to think about. So why should an enslaved person care for those who enslaved him? Why should this little girl care about Naaman? Girl said, your leprosy is karma. Good for you. Take that. Instead, she points him to the one who could cure him. He said, I know a man who can. We have an example for us here of loving your enemies. And this predates the command in Matthew 5:44. It points to something greater. It points to God's love for the undeserving. While we were yet sinners, it says, Christ died for us. God looked beyond our faults and saw our needs. Amazing grace. And God's grace will always baffle us. Take Gehazi. Verse 20 of the same text you read. He said, my master spared this Syrian. Someone that he despised. But you know what? God did not see a Syrian. He saw a man in need of his grace and mercy. And here it is. Human beings are most alike where it matters most. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And there's one Savior for all of us. You know, we like our labels, ULP and NDP, up the hill, down the hill, and all the different things we label ourselves by. God sees people. This girl was enabled by God to look beyond the label Syrian and see a person in need of healing. And she became God's instrument of grace because God works often through people. He says to Moses, Exodus 3, 8 to 10. You know, I have come down to deliver my people. Then he says to Moses, you know what? I am going to send you. We can be God's instruments of grace and deliverance. This girl is an instrument of God. She cared for the enemy. Then Elisha, he refused Naaman's money. That's also grace. Now, the money sent by the king of Syria can be valued, and I say conservatively, at $6 million. I guess he thought that was enough to buy a cure. Here's a human problem. We tell ourselves that money is the answer for everything. That's in the Bible, by the way. But where is it? Ecclesiastes 10:19? That's man under the sun reasoning that money buys everything. So some say if I win the lotto, well, I am set for life. But there are people who have won lotto and become worse off than before they won lotto. So money can solve some problems, but not all problems. We need wisdom, not money. You see, wisdom can get you money, but money can never get you wisdom. The king of Syria sent his millions. Elisha says, I don't want 1 cent of that. What was his message? The God of Israel is a God of grace. You cannot buy his favor. Salvation is a gift. You know, there are some people who rip people off, then give money to the church. That can't cut it. God wants obedience, not offerings. Man of God says, I don't want your money. But I believe as well, he was also saying something. He was saying the best things in life cannot be bought. It's been said, for example, money can buy a bed, but not sleep. It can buy medicine, but not health. It can buy a house, but not a home. It can buy amusement, but not happiness. And I've seen that in my own experience. I recall going to a house for lunch. Wealthy person, all this stuff was there. But I didn't enjoy that lunch at all. Or I saw a man with no respect for his wife. It didn't matter what the food was. I didn't want it. I guess she might have thought at one point she got a rich man, but then he treated her. So money is not going to buy these things. You see, the best things in life are found when we are right with God. That's the abundant life. And that is rooted in grace. Paul could say, by the grace of God, I am who I am. Elisha was saying to Naaman, the God of Israel is a God of grace. And your healing is really an act of grace. So grace is fundamental. Lesson number 2, pride is detrimental. It's harmful. It's dangerous. It's deadly. Now the cure here was simple and straightforward. Wash in the Jordan 7 times. It didn't require rocket science. There was no catching it. And I remember some years ago reading something, about this method of killing rats. Guaranteed to work, especially rat poison. But it says, step one is catch a rat. This one was simple. There was nothing to catch you. It was straight, wash 7 times. But Naaman didn't do this. Why? Well, he had things worked out. Verse 11 of 2 Kings 5. First of all, Elisha was supposed to come out to him. You see, he was a big man, right? He was a 5-star general. So the prophet was to come to him. He couldn't send a messenger. I remember somebody who thought he was big once went to a function. He got outside and he would not go in. You know why he wouldn't go in? He had to get escorted in. So he was not going to walk in. He's too big to walk in by himself. Naaman is saying, I am a big man. You should come to me. Don't send a messenger. First problem. Secondly, he knew how he was to be cured. Elisha was supposed to go and strike over the place and cure the leprosy. He knew what was to be done. Now I find it interesting, When I look at the ministry of Jesus and he healed people. He never did the same thing all the time. Even with the same problem. They give me 3 examples of blindness, for example. In John 9, 6 to 7, the man born blind, what did he do? He spat on the ground, made clay, put on the man's eyes, and said, go and wash. Full of silver. Another case, 2 blind men, Matthew 9, 27 to 29. He just touched the eyes and said, account to your faith. Bartimaeus, Mark 10, he just spoke the word. 3 different ways, but he healed. But Naaman had one thing in mind. It must be done this way. And in his pride, he walked away. You see, pride is a basic human problem. We like doing things our way. What the word of God says? Isaiah 53 verse 6, what we have done, turn everyone to his own way. And that's why this song is so popular, especially with men. I did it my way. Often sung at a man's funeral. I did it my way. But pride is detrimental because it says that God resists the proud. James 4 verse 6. And if God fights against you, you can't win. So God calls us to humble ourselves. I think the last time I spoke here, we talked about God's ways and our ways. And we need to understand that God is ahead of us. And when there is a difference, that we submit. We say, God, you know more than we do. And we submit, we trust, and obey. We humble ourselves. Now hear this. Some people might think, I have no pride problem because I'm not rich, I'm not of a certain color, of a certain class, I don't have education, so I'm not beautiful, so I can't be proud. That's a mistake. You see, pride is basically self-worship, wanting it my way. So God says, for example, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. And then when add all things to you, what do we say? We say that can't work. That can't work so. and we try to do it our way, and we miss the blessing. You know something? I wonder at times what the church would look like if each of us were to say, God, I'm going to try my best in everything I do to put you first. Think about that for a moment. How this church would be different. And let's pick one example. Attendance at church. I've said before, if everybody who ever came to Elim, and I don't mean those from abroad, those people around here, were to come to Elim on Sunday morning with Boston Space Open. People are inconsistent. They come now, they don't come. If we all decided we're going to make sure nothing would stop us, we'd see a big difference. And they can just use any other thing you can use, any other index. Where we say, God, we're going to put you first. We're going to trust you. It might look like we're going to lose something, but we trust you. And we put you first. We do that, we'll see a difference. We got to submit to God, let go of our pride. See, Naaman, if he had held on to his pride, he would have gone away with his leprosy, forever an outcast, never realizing his full potential. And some people will never rise because they have not learned to put God first. Pride, wanting my way, doing it the way I see it, is detrimental. In fact, it destroys us. It says pride goes before a fall. So therefore, beloved, let us humble ourselves before God. The third lesson we get from this passage is that knowing God is essential, indispensable. You see, this miracle had a result. It was not the big enough of Elisha, you know. What it was, that Naaman got to know the true God. He says, no, I know there's no other God. That's the point. You see, Assyrians came to know the true God. You see, he knew other gods, you know. The part that was going to read is about the God called Rimmon. That was their God, at least one of them. But he realized that that God didn't have the answer. He came to know that true God. You see, miracles, beloved, are meant to point people to God and not to a miracle worker. And we see this even in the ministry of Jesus. For example, in Luke 7:16, after he raised that widow's son from the dead, the people glorified God. And in Luke 13, that woman who was bowed over, when she was made straight, what did she do? She glorified God. All about God. And through his healing, Naaman came to know the only true God. And hear this. Knowing God is the only thing worth boasting about, according to Jeremiah 9:22 and 24. It's not about our riches, not about our strength, not about our wisdom. It is knowing God. And if you know me, you know that one of my favorite verses is this. The people that do not know God shall be strong and do exploits. And this morning I was blessed, you know, I mean, my notes are here, at the testimonies we had. We had 4 at least this morning. You see, when you know God, you're going to have a testimony. I remember when I camped in Trinidad many years ago now, maybe 20 years ago, time flies. At that camp, I learned the song which has been a theme for me as well. God will make a way. And I recall at that camp, it was a small camping. You must treasure experiences. When God works for you, treasure it, never forget it, and share it with people. Have a testimony. I recall one person said, her husband was sick, and the phone was dead. Not working for how long? They had to call the ambulance. Pick up the phone and dial. The phone worked to call the ambulance, and it never worked again. God did that. You see, when you have this kind of experience and you share it, that's how you overcome. It says God is real. And here's part of the problem with some people. They never see what God can do. You know why? Never give God a chance to work. They never allow God to work. They try to fix it themselves, find their own solution. They never see God at work. Here's what the Bible says about God. Verse 69. His eyes are running throughout the whole earth to show himself strong for those whose hearts are perfect towards him. When we obey God, even when it's hard, we will see what God can do. Naaman humbled himself. He obeyed. He saw God at work. And he went back home with a testimony of what God did for him. Think for a moment, beloved, what it would be like if each of us took the time to really know God, to see him work in our lives. We'd have testimonies. And hear this. When you know your God, no one can intimidate you. So take the story from Sunday school about the 5 furnace. When the king says, okay, if you don't bow, I'm going to throw in the fire. And which God is there to deliver you? And they said, we're not scared. Our God whom you serve is able. Chapter 1 of Daniel. When they come with the food, when the test was given and God came through. So when God does things for us, we know about God. He does nothing by fluke. He'll do it again and again. So as we have these testimonies, we're encouraged. We know God, not intimidated. Not just that. When you know God, no one can. But God told Joshua, I'm with you. And so we can go forward, take ground, and the stronghold will come tumbling down. When we know God, we'll turn our community right side up. We got to know God. But you see, it starts with obedience. We obey God in the small things first. And we move to bigger things. And we see God work in the bigger things as well. We are living, beloved, in perilous times. Things are falling apart around us. The foundations are being shaken. You talk about the world order. Is there any world order now? I don't know. Everything is topsy-turvy. But people who know their God will make a difference in these perilous times, in such a time as this. We have heard of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Well, hear this. What is the God of Hayden Marshall like? And you put your name in the blank the same way. What is your God like? What people will see of God in your life? That's the question. Knowing God, that's what's essential, indispensable. Nothing can replace it. To be able to make a difference in this world, you have to know God and stand up for Him in this perilous era in which we find ourselves. So, as we come to a close, what have we learned from a look at the accountability of Naaman? Well, number one, grace is fundamental. God's dealings with us are rooted in grace. You see this exemplified in this little girl, her concern for Naaman. Picture of God looking beyond her faults and seeing her need. We see also Elisha refusing the money. You can't buy God's favor. Money can't solve all our problems. Salvation is a gift. It's all of grace. Pride is detrimental. Naaman almost missed the blessing through pride. He wanted to do things his way. God says, humble yourself. Do it my way. Seek me first and watch me work. If pride is allowed to rule our lives, it will hinder us, not ultimately destroy us. It's detrimental. And knowing God is essential. That's the high point of our study. Naaman came to know God. He went back with a testimony. Knowing God is what matters, beloved. To be able to minister effectively in a time like this, you have to know your God. So, the question comes as we close, who is your God? And the answer we give will determine whether we stand or fall in such a time as this. May we truly know the God of the universe. And when all things fall apart around us, we remain on our feet because our God will make us stand. Amen.